If you are an executive who needs to coach his or her team, or if you're an executive coach, a leadership coach, or a life coach, you're going to love this podcast episode because we're going to dissect in real time a real life coaching session. The idea is to get inside the mind of a coach and, in this case, his client to understand what each of them is thinking at every stage of the conversation. We will uncover things like, what are the words, the phrases that inspire trust? How do you guide a discussion to make a breakthrough? And how do you motivate your client and at the same time hold them accountable? My name is Raj Kara. I'm the publisher of morebusiness.com, and I'm your host today. Joining me for this unique episode is my guest, Dr. Jeff Kaplan. He is the 2022 Leadership Coach of the Year by CEO Today magazine, and his client, Sandy Gomberg, former CEO of a Philadelphia-based hospital. And I will be interrupting both of them throughout this entire conversation to pause, to understand why the coach is asking what he's asking, and why the client is saying what she's saying. Before we get started, I ask you, please click like and subscribe so that you get more episodes and more content that's just like this to help you with your business. Well, let's start the conversation. Welcome, Jeff. Welcome, Sandy.
Thanks, Raj.
Hey, let's kick this off. You guys have known each other for a little while, which is a pretty important thing to develop that coaching relationship and that trust. Sandy, could you talk to that for just a moment?
Sure. Jeff and I met at this point about 20 years ago. I'd like to say when we were small children, but I was just approaching, kind of senior leadership, and it was my very first professional coaching experience. And we had the opportunity to work together for a couple of years. And then through the last 20 years, our paths have reconnected on a number of different occasions, kind of re-exploring that relationship.
That sounds really good. And that's important because as we'll uncover today, getting breakthroughs isn't something that just happens the first time you do a coaching session with somebody. It's something that happens over time when you build trust and you kind of chip away at the behaviors and the thoughts that are either limiting you or that are about to release you and make you have that big breakthrough. Jeff, anything more to add to that?
Sandy is one of my most beloved clients. I absolutely have so much love and admiration for Sandy. That we learned, I learned as much from Sandy, hopefully as she, picks up in our conversations. And she's been just a wonderful friend and colleague, and, among my first clients 20 years ago. And I just want to reiterate this, neither Sandy nor I know what's about to happen, right? Like, she's going to present an issue and we're going to dive in. So this is as real as it gets.
And I love that both of you have volunteered to be brave enough to go online and be able to share your innermost thoughts about this conversation. It is unscripted, and that's probably the best part of that. It was to get candid, maybe raw. So let's get started. And you guys know the rules. I will be interrupting you and saying, Jeff, why'd you say that? Sandy, what are you thinking right now? Jeff, I'm turning the mic over to you to get started.
Sure. Hi, Sandy. Thanks again for allowing this space, right? And the courage that you are demonstrating and being here today. So what do you want to focus on today?
Well, so I saw a presentation, a clip of a presentation earlier today, and I think it underscores where I'm at right now. And that is when, as a accomplished executive who is the kind of the teacher, right, become the student, and how do I figure out what skills I need to learn? And so here's the real life circumstance. Now, about 7 years ago, I retired from being a hospital CEO executive. And I had the opportunity to start to work with a startup company and ultimately became a co-founder. And as I've kind of come through that journey and have kind of moved that company along, I really have come to want to be a good advisor to new leaders, new companies, new entrepreneurs, because we need to disrupt healthcare from the outside. But I'm learning that I'm not sure I have the right skills right now to be an advisor. And I think I want to kind of understand that a little bit.
Two questions. What makes you say that? And to be really clear, so let's say we're doing this for 20, 30 minutes, add some for Roger's interruptions. What's going to be different at the end of this conversation than it is right now?
Okay, they're hard questions. So I say this because I've had the privilege to experience working with someone who I think does an amazing job working with individuals to ask questions and to guide them in their exploratory thinking. And I know that's not my go-to. I know I'm an operator and my go-to is to, in a nanosecond, be like the good doctor where everything comes in my head and I'm ready to move. And I know they're different skills, and I watched how an expert did it, and I don't think I'm an expert.
And I'm going to do a timeout right here. And so I love the way this was opening up because, Jeff, you asked Sandy what she'd like to talk about. And Sandy, you came prepared with a topic. That doesn't always happen in coaching sessions. Sometimes people know they need coaching advice. So did you intentionally come to this with a thing that you wanted to talk about in mind, or did that just pop in your head when Jeff asked you the question?
I would say half and half. It's a real, I'm struggling with this that I said out loud to Jeff.
Mhm.
We didn't investigate it. We didn't talk about it. And so I used it as an opportunity to say, okay, if that's really on my mind, let me put it out here because you're seeing it live and
And Jeff,
unvarnished.
the way you responded was almost setting an agenda for the remainder of the conversation. And it was done so swiftly and so tactfully that you asked what you wanted to get out of the conversation, what was going to be different in 30 minutes from now. Why did you say it that way? Is
Um,
this how you do most of your sessions, by the way?
yes. In fact, I actually am, there's a few things that I kind of insist as a coach because it's really collaborative. One of them is that they fill out a 4-question form ahead of our conversations. Question
Mhm.
number 4 is, what do you want to focus on today?
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're just scrambling around. You could spend 20 minutes on how was your week? And then at the end of it, did we, so I want to make sure that we get to where she wants to get to and create space and room for whatever might show up along the way.
And
All
Raj,
right.
it took me a long time
Yeah.
to be strong enough to actually say what I knew was in my head.
Yeah.
So that's, individuals who are starting on this journey or starting with new people on this journey need to be patient because it's in your head. It's just hard to give it life.
All right. Let's keep going.
So, I think I heard, so that, which the image I have in my head, Sandy, is a question mark, right? I heard the word advice. I heard, you said I'm an advisor, right? And then I'm guiding. And by the way, I'm an operator, right? And do I, you open up with, do I need a skill, right? And so 2 things are coming to my mind, right? One is, darn it, claim it. Right? So claim, so what would it be to claim? Let's just start here. What would it be, Sandy, to claim the coach within you, the non-advisor coach?
Well, I'm a little bit nervous claiming it because I'm not sure in the moment. I always know the boundary of coaching or teaching
Yeah.
or um in- you know pushing too hard or kind of wanting to will it to happen. You know what I mean? Like if you said to me, a colleague said to me yesterday, oh, I have this new company and it's about diagnosing things that show up on x-rays that weren't there before. And like before you could say anything else, I'm like, you should totally do this, you should totally do that. Like and he was so excited because of the topic I've brought out, but I was in a like action mode.
Right. And so just to get clear, so in this conversation, it's going to be about, um, is it adding? I feel like it's adding, right? Um, Adding to your current toolbox.
Um, yes, I know that I am a go-to operator, kind of executor, and that's how I
Right.
work. I want to figure out how I can
Right.
use that in in I don't know if it's using that or not using that, right? Maybe I need to not use it
So,
to create that other.
I understand. So let's go there. But first, can we first celebrate the amazing wisdom, experience, knowledge, and skill that you have? Right? Not everybody has like, oh my gosh, I totally know what you need to do. Right. And there are times, let's acknowledge that there are times, I always say like the client's the expert, except for when they're not. Right. And so there are times when they just don't know what they don't know. And come on, you and I both know that you have given advice and guided in ways that have been hugely helpful. And let's talk about that, where that's limiting. But can you tell me right now what it would sound like for you to honor that part of you that is wise and experienced and knowledgeable?
You mean describe it?
Just what word or phrase or picture comes to mind?
Pause for a second. This is a beautiful part of this conversation because what I'm hearing is, correct me if I'm wrong, Sandy, but Jeff has asked you 3 times to claim it. The words I believe he used was claim it, celebrate it. What would it sound like? Honor yourself. But you haven't gotten there with him. Jeff, are you trying to get her to feel that? Is that why you've said it 3 times? Or am I missing something?
Well, so Sandy is being very thoughtful in this conversation, right?
Okay.
So what's going on in my mind is, so what I'm wrestling with is a parallel process, right? Like I have an idea where I want to be in 5 minutes, right? Based on what she said,
Okay.
right? And then I'm wrestling with how much do I want to really get clear about the agenda versus being where she is right now. And I'm noticing her thoughtfulness, right? And I'm wanting to appreciate the thoughtfulness. And I just don't want to step over. Like we could have jumped right into,
Yeah.
well, how is that limiting and all that? But like, darn it, like Sandy is, and again, maybe this is also my knowing of someone, but she's such an amazing advisor and guide and stuff and has all this stuff. So yes, I want to create space in this conversation about what's working and the wonderfulness of who she is and what she brings to these conversations before we get into the fixing, obviously not fixing her, but the quote fixing of what she feels is missing.
And Sandy, I love that's a great word, thoughtful responses, because I can see you thinking as you're replying to him. Tell me about what's going through your mind right now as you hear him ask these questions and maybe even react to what he just said about you being thoughtful.
Um, I I appreciate what I was feeling is kind of this tension because I appreciate the acknowledgement, right? That I have gratitude for the acknowledgement. It feels a little off because I'm not feeling as competent at this, at that same level.
Mhm.
And so, when you're when on one hand, I know I could walk into any organization and diagnose its operating challenges quickly and put together a plan. Like I know how to do all of that stuff.
Mm.
And but at the same time, I know there's times that I don't know how I know. I don't know how I know, right?
It's instinctive,
right.
right?
It just happens. And so, um, I, I am proud of that. I know that I'm appreciated by people that I've worked for, and, or with, or in support of. It's just not a natural place to start.
Right.
So
Jeff, I can see, just as a little side note, I can see why she's one of your favorites. Okay, keep going. Robert.
Okay. So the word anchor in its most beautifulness and its most limitingness is showing up for me. Your knowing, your knowledge, your experience has been your anchor. It's the place you go to, quite frankly, A, to add value, but also when you lack confidence, because I'm also hearing this, confidence thing. First of all, let me just pause. Does that resonate with you?
yes.
And so I'm thinking, I'm not suggesting we go here now, but we add a new anchor that allows greater flexibility. So just for a moment, standing on top of a mountain, perhaps, because that's what he's coming to mind, or wherever.
Where's my boat?
Yeah, exactly. Well, right. So right. And so what's interesting about a boat that you just brought in is like, part of it is you chart the course, right? And you have your maps and your guides, right? And your anchors, of course. And then part of it is like the wind and the weather and there are circumstances outside your control. And you pivot, right? Based on the things that you're not aware of. And I'm wondering how much when you know already what this person should do, how you're getting in your and their way from the vast, infinite amount of, chartered courses that they could go.
Yes, that's what I'm worried about.
Okay. Not to mention, it's so funny. Like what's happening here now is like, I think I know. And what I know is every time I know and I tell you or another client the answer, I am holding you small. And again, it doesn't mean that sometimes when they don't know what they don't know, we don't like play games with them. Sometimes we give them a direct piece of advice. But do me a favor. Can you think of the last, I don't want to hear it, but the last piece of advice that you remember giving? Just tell me when you're there, when you have it. Okay. Now, if you could go back in time in your mind, because the advice, and then you opened your mouth and advice came out. But before then, there was an observation and a curiosity. What was the curiosity?
The curiosity was the person had said, I have this solution and I want to commercialize it. And the the thing that hit me is, well, you need to find out who has the problem that would need that thing. And then I was like, okay, well, who has that problem? Like, here would be the people who might have that problem. And so
Right.
right. So and it was an oblique angle. Like I took the conversation in an oblique angle. So I was happy with that I was able to give something new to perspective, but I think I did it for him, right?
Yes.
I did the work, and I don't think,
Yes.
I think I do the work too much sometimes.
You also limit yourself when you're not when you're not sharing your curiosities and creating a space for discovery together.
Okay.
You also limit your ability to help them because you are vastly knowledgeable and experienced, but at some point you run out of your go-to piece of advice unless you're continuing to learn and that kind of thing, right? And so can you just describe to me what it would look and or sound like if you were this other thing that you're talking about, this more of a, I guess, coach than advisor?
I think I would engage the person in more of a conversation than an education construct, like that I would, like maybe he would have come to it all by himself, right? Maybe if I just said that it could, what do you think about this group? That,
Can I cut you off?
uh-huh.
If you were coaching, if this person you were coaching was a couple decades older and really wise, with tons of experience in the subject matter that they were talking about, would you approach it any differently than you're approaching this?
I'm sure I would.
So here's an invitation. You know where I'm
Okay.
going. Next time you have a conversation, stop holding him so small and just act as if. Act as if and see what happens.
God, I don't want to interrupt, but I got so many questions, so I'm going to interrupt if you
Yes.
don't mind, Jeff. All right, this is such a like I'm watching like a flower blossom. The way you're having this conversation. There's a few things I observed. So you heard Sandy saying some things, and you paused and you said, "What I'm hearing is," and then you reiterated some of those things, but then you said, "Let me pause. Does this resonate?" And so that sounded very intentional, was to make sure that you had clarity on what you thought Sandy was saying. Am I accurate there?
Yeah. So I was about to do what we're talking about that she can do to her clients, right? Like
Okay.
I had a thought, but rather than the word that I wrote down, the phrase I wrote down, by the way, is dumbing it down. Dummy, your skill, your knowledge, whatever. And I realized I was about to boulder through her, right, to get to this endpoint. And I just wanted to pause and make sure she was still with me.
But it also looked like you were trying to hone in on something in the course of that dialogue. It sounded like you were leading her down a path. Is that what you were also, because you mentioned something, you don't want to give her the answer of what you think the answer is, because the answer to her may be different, right?
Yes. And notice I haven't even, I had an invitation, right?
Right.
But so what we're a lot of what we're doing in this space is a collaborative discovery, right? We are discovering together. And I know that Sandy is whole creative and resourceful, just like, her guy is. And again, I get sometimes he doesn't know what he doesn't know and she can bring some value, but what I hear in this is that she wants to expand her offering. Right.
Mhm.
And so it was that. It's like, let's just do that. And yes, I was giving a directive, but again, as an invitation so that she could, because I also know she's very practical and coaching should go somewhere at the end of the day, right? Like in terms of what's the thing that she's got. And so I think if there's a limiting belief that she has about him, and again, part of it is valid, but it doesn't matter. Right. And so anyway, so yeah, so I wasn't trying to lead as much as I was wanting to discover together and make sure that we were on the same page.
But then you swiftly took her to a different space by presenting a scenario in which the age difference that you described.
Figure that out.
And I saw Sandy's eyes really like open up. Sandy, what were you thinking when he said something like that? When he presented it from that viewpoint?
It allowed me to, it made me feel differently. Like I really thought about like if this was a sage expert and it was kind of the other way from the expert standpoint, how that would feel and how I would naturally slow it down, how I would naturally probe for what I might not know. And it would feel really different. And so I could feel that.
Mhm. So to close that, just that topic. So that's a very interesting technique, right, Jeff, is to allow somebody you're coaching to experience how they might feel in different situations with almost the same topic. Is that correct?
What I would say is accelerating the process I do this a lot. I'll say, can we just go here now? Right. And I'll use sometimes visualization just to we can cut out 10 minutes of conversation just to be in this space and then see what we see in this space. Right. We can bridge that from here to there. Right. But first, let's just get clear what this space is.
Got it. Now, I know we're dissecting the conversation. Unfortunately, in the process of doing that, we sort of pause and then you have to reset. So I'll ask you to reset the conversation and keep going. So thanks.
So let's start here then. Sandy, where are you now and where do you want to go next?
Well, the small thing like was hard to hear because I worked so hard, right, on creating that safe space and the gratitude. And in my when you said that, I was like, oh, and then Raj made a break. So I was like, I could pull myself out of there. But because I would never want that, right? I would never want that intentionally. So I think that's for me kind of a light bulb that will show up now. So I'm feeling good that I might be able to trigger myself to think about the person as big and not little. Which while I'm kind of navigating this space and seeing what other kinds of skills, at least I can tap that break and test it and see if it feels better. And if I feel like the quality of the exchange remains valuable to both of us.
Yeah, here's what I would say. You can always go back and tell them something, right? Like I have had many of moments where I was coaching somebody and I had an amazing solution to develop. And I held back. And by the end of the call, it was A, not so amazing of a solution, and or B, completely unnecessary. And I know that they got more value that I held back, even though I was ready to grab a book off my bookshelf and give it to, right. And I was ready to do that and I withheld. Right. And so, just for that, right. Remember, you get to always go there later, right. If needed, but you got to let it go and then be back in this moment. I had an image of a card, if it's value. Remember I talked about a different angle. So, the size of like a playing card, that on one side is an anchor and the other side is a light bulb, right? Your word, right? And what if you carried that around and just looked at both sides? Because I think we're not looking to take anything away of the value you bring. I think we're looking to add to. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I think, yes, looking at it that way, it's not such a, like I've got to go get a book to learn how to ask questions. Just ask the questions.
But right, that curiosity. But remember, before that advice given, can we go back for just a minute to the commercialization situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want to commercialize this product. You went through this. This is going to be helpful, I think, just dissect this. What were you thinking in that moment when he said, I want to do X? Slow down. That over here was, you said what you wanted, you said what to do. What was your immediate judgment or thought when he said, I want to do X?
Um, so this is a colleague who is very new to this space, and it's a really hard and complicated space to deal with health systems right now, right? They don't have a lot of money. It's hard to sell into them. And so what I felt, I might question that right now, is like, like I need to help him because he's gonna, it's gonna take a long time. I want to give it give him something that would make him more successful faster, a different way to look at something, because of because I've learned so much in the past couple of years and realized I would have been a much better CEO if I than what I know now. But I guess that's for everything. So it had nothing to do with me. I mean,
Right.
the deal, the arrangement. I wasn't part of the work. Um, but I can see that that would make him little.
What would you, if I was him now, what might you, how might you respond differently to hold him bigger?
I I would have definitely slowed slowed the conversation, and not led to a solution. I would have asked him what he was thinking, what did he try so far, what did they try so far, who did he think had the problem.
I mean, this goes back to our very beginning of this conversation, right? About the agenda, right? And so I just heard you say X. So how can I help right
Mhm.
now? Like where do you, like, literally creating the agenda with him, and what are you looking for by bringing that into this conversation? Um, but I think there was a curiosity even before the limiting beliefs. I think there was, like, I wonder, I wonder what you might be missing. I wonder, um, what your perspective is around this. What's important to you about this? Like, what's driving this idea? Um, w- what would happen if you screw it up? What would happen if you're amazingly successful? Like, right? And because you want him to be successful, but you don't want him to make mistakes that you made, right? Even though we know it's not about you. And quite frankly, like you and I right now, even by going that route, you've already made up your mind that the value should be in the destination and not the journey. Like, think about some of the mistakes you made, which were like the most amazing life and or work like recalibrations ever, right? Like, who says he's not supposed to go down this alley and like discover something that he had no idea?
Mhm. Okay. Don't
I mean,
decide for that.
this isn't this, I have chills. Eh, uh, What's going on for you right now inside here?
I'm pretty sure we might have had this conversation before once.
Maybe. 2006. I don't know.
Sandy, that's really interesting you say that because I know I've had professional coaches for a long time also. And what you said resonated so much with me that I think we've had this conversation before. Uh, Jeff, do you also see that sometimes when you're working with someone, because I know I'm kind of thick-headed sometimes, and it takes me a while to sometimes actually take action on the stuff that I've talked about, and it won't be until I've heard it a few times that I internalize it. So what you said, Sandy, wow, that was an eye-opener for me. Tell me what reminded you of a prior conversation.
Um, One of the very early things I learned from a boss was bad, um, bad guidance. And he had told me that every meeting I went into, every exchange I went into, I better know that I could write the minutes of that meeting before I went into it. And so that's what very early in my career. And it was one of the things I had to work on breaking, that habit and skill from very early on. That, is it illegal, immoral? Is somebody going to die if this doesn't happen, or the mistake isn't made, or it's a matter if it's red or blue? And it wasn't so much that I was stuck on whether it mattered. I was got into this mindset that I had to see the beginning, the middle, and the end, and so at way different times through crazy journeys in my life, I've had to kind of reset and say, does does this matter? Um, is this a life or death situation? If this is a code and I'm a nurse, I'm going to tell you what to do. But if it's not life or death or a code, I don't need to drive that agenda. But that shows up in so many different ways in your life, whether it's kids or whatever. I found it's something that clearly I need to continue to rework on and relearn.
You, but I think you just nailed the metric. So if you're giving advice 80% of the time, and maybe you should be giving advice 20% of the time, right? Because all you got to remind yourself, is this life or death?
Maybe I think though I need to change verb giving, because
Right.
I feel so like
Right.
I want to tell you this. I want to exchange this. I want to teach you this information that you may not have, or share that with you. And I they might not need or want it, or it might be too much at the same time. So I need to be more emotionally self-aware about that feeling of wanting to give.
I think it's easier than that, because what's missing in this whole conversation is the client. Not that he should be here, but again, going back to where we started, getting really clear. There's one of my former clients I love, he says, somebody taught this early on. It's now part of my keynote with his giving credits there. He said, does this with his wife and he does it with his colleagues. When they start to say something, he says, do you want me to listen? Do you want me to share, or do you want me to solve? Right. And so in the same way, when I ask my client the agenda, right, like, well, what do you want to get from this conversation? If they want you to help them solve, okay, now we have an opening for you to bring in some advice. Though I'd still say there's still a lot more room to hold them bigger than maybe you're holding them, right? And even when you're solving with them, like, they can be bigger and you can be smaller in terms of the content. But if the negotiation was like, hey, no, I really want this, then great, like, go play, right?
Mhm.
But I think why I said I think this is easier is if he said, look, I really want to figure this. I want you generally. I want to figure out myself. I want you, guy. I want your support. I want to, and gave you permission to dummy it down, right? To hold off your experience in that way and just show up and create space. Wow. Then I think you would feel free to not have to share. Like, it's a sense of like taking ownership and responsibility for his journey.
Tandy, can I ask you, right before Jeff shared what he just shared, what were you hoping to hear from him after you expressed your thoughts
Great
about,
question.
it was almost like a frustration. What were you hoping to hear from him?
It's great.
Um, I'm not sure. Um, because I'm watching this kind of peel away. So I honestly don't think I had um, because it's a safe space,
Yeah.
right? I know he's not gonna, hurt me with something he says. And so, um, I was just leaving it there.
Okay. Did he respond in a way that made you feel good about the way he responded? I mean, is that what you were looking to hear, or did you want to hear something else on top of that?
Um, no, I when when you work with somebody, I think you, um, over time, you kind of, get that kind of that trust rhythm, and um,
He.
I think because of that, Jeff's more aware of words and phrases and concepts that are going to have different meaning for me, or make things clearer,
Hmm.
because we've discussed it and got clear at some point.
Hmm.
So that kind of shared definition or shared concept. So for and he knows I'm very action oriented, right? He
Hmm.
knows that I want to know what my homework is. Like, what do I have to do? Right. And
Hmm.
sometimes it's not doing, it's actually not doing is the homework, right? So what do you
Yeah.
so I think in part he's giving what he knows I need, which is something to work on. Is That's just how we've worked over time, but enough words around it to um, make it clear that it's s- s- stuff I've seen before in other relationships. So to connect the familiar with the hard.
Mhm. And Jeff, was that your intent also? Because would you have responded differently to a client who is different?
Well, every client coach relationship in every moment is different, right? And so I would definitely respond differently. I would have no idea how I would respond. But um, what was going on in my mind is like, I feel it's like when a movie and we're getting so close to the conclusion of the movie, right? And I'm like, oh my God, like it's right here, right? And you know, ever since I brought in like holding him small, I feel like I invoked a little bit of shaming. And then when Sandy said, not purposely at all. Like when Sandy said, I need to like basically self-manage my emotions, right? In that moment, I'm like, no, like, like, I mean, yeah, you can do that, but like, what does that mean? And it's like, that's hard. Like, that seems hard, like, and heavy, and, like, it's not that at all. And it can be that, but, like, for what? And I tend to in these moments, I tend to, like, think at all these different levels, and one of the levels is, like, what does the universe keep like, what keeps showing up? And one of the things that keeps showing up is this agenda thing, and I was connecting it to, oh my God, 2080, 2080. Like it's just, it's not like don't give yourself. It's like give yourself less. And she, I felt like, oh my God, like there was the solution when she said early in my life, when Sandy, when you said, early in my, my career, this boss, whatever. And it's like, not, and you got through that in a better way by coming up with the solution that is asked for in this moment, which was, is it life or death? Is it this and this? And granted, there's a few other litmus test items that would be a homework, right? Here's a homework, right? Is like, what are those questions to ask yourself? And like, what is co-creating the agenda look like? So that you can give yourself permission and so that your client can give you permission to hold back the great wisdom. Again, you can always pick it up later, if you want, to then be in a different space. Notice, by the way, both of you and me, like what we haven't done here is even like, do you hear me giving coaching skills to Sandy? Like, here's how to ask a powerful question. Here's how to listen. Here's how to, that's not what this is about, because I know that Sandy is smart enough, resourceful enough, and has been, quite frankly, doing coaching for decades with, interns and direct reports and colleagues and others, that she knows how to do that. It's really just getting herself out of the way and giving herself permission to go there.
Yeah, and you're right about not needing to teach someone, an executive's as skilled as Sandy, how to coach. I mean, but at the same time, even Michael Jordan wanted a coach, right? And I think that's like a great example of no matter where you are, there's always things you can polish and things you can use to grow. This has been really fascinating, and I really appreciate you allowing me to be that fly on the wall and interrupting now and then. And I think there's probably times where I almost felt like interrupting, but you had such a great time, so I held back. What other things? It sounds like, Jeff, before like we try to close some of this out, you didn't come into this conversation with an agenda that I'm going to help Sandy solve the problem. It sort of evolved in the conversation that there are points brought up that Sandy can take home and decide which ones she wants to take action items on, right? And Sandy, I like that you say you're an action-oriented person, because I think a lot of executives are very much that way. What do I got to do now to fix the problem now, right? That's how I think. That's how I've grown my companies and stuff, and I totally feel that. And so, do you go into each conversation, each coaching conversation, obviously this is not your first, looking for what can we take out of this conversation, or what are we going to be able to do? What's my action items? What am I going to be able to do this week, next week, this month with the information I talked about today? Is that part of your thought process or not?
In the very beginning, it was very much part of it. Like, I would almost be more excited for Jeff to tell me what my homework was. And it was, one time I had to practice laissez-faire leadership with one direct report, assertive with another, aggressive with another. Right? Like, it was sometimes it was interactive, sometimes it was reading, sometimes it was contemplative or meditation, or I was very organized around homework because I wanted to practice whatever it was I needed to practice to get better at it. Now I think it's much more, the being able to find the kind of non-judgmental self-awareness of it with a little bit of practicality or action items kind of sprinkled in to make it real.
Yeah, I just was, so the irony here, right, is that that's exactly what this topic has been about for you as an advisor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that balance between telling somebody what to do and discovery. And as an operator, you're really good at solving problems. But sometimes, like, discovery,
It's not my problem to solve.
It's not your problem to solve. There's a bigger win when we're not solving the problem. Yeah, I will tell you that real quick, Raj, like as a format, and what was happening today is throughout a conversation, I'm constantly, if where we're going to end up is over, here, I'm constantly, like, not constantly, like periodically, I'm checking with myself about what was their agenda item, whether, like the prep form I talked about. I literally have, in front of me my computer or print it out, and I'm occasionally throughout, like, just glancing at it, just occasionally, like in those pauses right? I might just be like, look, just to remind myself. And so I go, got it. And now I'm back in the conversation. And then like, who knows what's going to happen next? But and I think that's certainly my style is to do both. Like, let's get to where you said you wanted to go. Unless in the middle of the conversation, we say, hey, you said you want to go here or here, which seems to be very different. What do you want to do? Right. So that's fine. But also that dance that happens in the moment where you don't know what's dancing in the moment, right? Where you don't know what's going to happen next.
I appreciate this very much, Jeff and Sandy. I learned a lot just watching, and I've had a professional coach for a dozen years. And I just learned so much just by watching both of you. And I could relate a lot to what Sandy was saying. Boy, that resonated with me too. And there's a reason, Jeff, why you are Leadership Coach of the Year. Masterful with words. Thank you for sharing, both of you. Thank you for being open.
Thank you both. Sandy, again, lots of love. Thank you so much for really being here and your courage and
Right
what
back
you
at you.
give to the world.
Yep.
And Raj, thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely.